So now let's look at the three irrefutable signs concerning the end of the age. I want to give you some road signs, if you will, right? Road signs give you two pieces of valuable information. Number one, they let you know that you're going in the right direction, right? So if you left here and you were saying, well, I want to drive to New York City, and you're driving for a couple of days, all of a sudden you see a road sign that says Dallas, Texas, next exit. How many of you know you're on the wrong road? How many of you know some people think they're driving to New York, but they're on their way to Dallas, Texas right now? Mercy. Why? Because they're not looking at the signs. Oh, come on, somebody. If you're not looking at the signs, honey, you don't know where you're going. So the first thing a sign does for it, it lets us know that we're on the right path. If you've ever taken a road trip, the second thing that a sign will tell you is how close you are to your destination. My God, I hope somebody's hearing this morning. When you're driving to New York City, 100 miles, 80 miles, 70 miles, getting closer. So signs give us two vital pieces of information. One, are we going in the right direction? Number two, how much further do we have to go? Prophetic road signs are much in the same way. So now let's look at the Olivet Discourse. This is Matthew 24. I'm going to begin reading in verse 32. Now, I want you to make this personal as we read this. I mean, because sometimes we read the Bible as like Jesus was speaking to them. No. This is speaking to you. So put your name in here. Put your name in here. Okay? Michael learned this lesson from a fig tree. Put your name in there. Right? As soon as its twigs get tender and its leaves come out, you know. Gnosko in the Greek. You have the knowledge. You know what's happening. That summer is near. You know it. Jesus gave us a very elementary analogy of his second coming. Anybody looking at the fig tree can see it. Just like the sign. If you look at the fig tree, you see it blooming. However, if you're not watching the fig tree, you have no idea what season you're in. Verse 33, even so, when you see all these things, here it is again, gnosko, you know that it is near. It's right at the door. Jesus is speaking of the second coming. He's speaking of the rapture. He's speaking of the end days. Verse 34, truly I tell you, in this generation, 70 to 80 year period, what generation? The generation that witnesses all these aforementioned events. That's the generation Jesus is speaking about. He says, truly I tell you, this generation will certainly not pass away until all these things have happened. Heaven and earth will pass away, honey, but my word, it's not going anywhere. It will never pass away. Now, some believe that this generation that Jesus is speaking about was the generation that lived at the time of Jesus and when the temple was destroyed in 70 A.D. The issue with that position is that all these things hadn't happened, and that generation 2,000 years ago have certainly passed away. Y'all with me? Say amen. Now, we're not going to go through all the signs in Matthew 24, but what Jesus is referring to is wars, rumors of war, pestilence, plague, also known as COVID. Come on, somebody. Kingdom versus kingdom, China versus USA, nations, ethnos versus Asians, ethnicities right within our own nation, all rising against one another. False teachers, false prophets are arising. How many of you know this world is full and getting more filled with false prophets and false teachers by the minute? Come on, does somebody hear what I'm saying? Also part of this, Christ returns in his glory. This is how, come on, church. This is how Christ is going to return. This is what it's going to look like. So don't be alarmed. Remember, I tell you all the time, these messages aren't to scare you, but to prepare you. Jesus is coming. Tell your neighbor. Tell your relatives. Tell somebody. So what we're going to focus on this morning is the number one sign, and that is the budding of the fig tree. The fig tree is symbolic of Israel in the Bible. And Jesus says that when you see the fig tree or Israel begin to bud, when it is flourishing, the time is here. It's referred to as the fig tree in Jeremiah, Joel, Hosea. They all refer to Israel as the fig tree. Now, a couple things to remember. When Jesus spoke these words, there was no nation of Israel. Right? It was Palestine. There was no nation of Israel. It was Palestine, and it was renamed by the Romans because of their hatred of the Jews. My question, where's the Roman Empire today? The last time that Israel had been an independent nation was 606 BC, prior to the Babylonians capturing them. Even so, in the midst of not even a nation being there, Jesus prophesied about a budding fig tree or a budding Israel. So now, do you see why it is so important to keep our prophetic eye on Israel? Come on, is somebody with me? Israel is the center of God's promise. Israel is the center of God's prophetic word, not America. You know, because we're Americans, we seem to want to judge everything by America. No. It's about Israel. It's about Israel. Listen, I'm an American. I love my country. I love America. God has used America like no other nation on earth in history, creating a safe haven for the Jewish people for centuries, as well as preaching the gospel throughout the earth. No other nation like America has spread the gospel throughout the earth like this nation has done. God has used this nation mightily. He used us mightily in World War II when a Satanist named Hitler tried to annihilate the Jewish people. Come on, y'all with me? I'm speaking history here. God has used the USA mightily, but God has not replaced Israel with America. This book and these prophecies are about the nation of Israel. Come on, and somebody give God a praise in this house.
To every nation, to every generation, to all creation, to proclaim the gospel of Jesus Christ. To every nation, every generation, to all creation, to proclaim the gospel of Jesus.